People that made a deal with a friend that if they weren't married by a certain age they would marry. How did it go? We met in college, and were instant best friends. I was 20, she was 18. We spent all our time together, and were briefly lovers, but we never formally dated because both of us were very much into being wild and free and enjoying our youth. We dated other people on and off, but we talked about it and agreed that a committed relationship between the two of us would be an all or nothing kind of thing. Since neither of us wanted to give up our hedonistic, promiscuous, irresponsible lifestyle, we made a point of not committing to a relationship. A few years went by that way, and we were very happy, right up until her sisters died. It was a car accident. They were 16 and 18, and both were killed in the crash, dead on arrival at the hospital. My friend was utterly, completely devastated. It still hurts me to remember it, even now. Her father, though, was even more devastated, to the point where he was legitimately willing to let himself starve to death rather than try to go on living. She moved home, out of state, to take care of him. She cut ties with everyone for a while, even me. I didn't see her again for 2 years. She was so different after that. Before the accident, she'd always been the most joyful, exuberant, positive person I'd ever met. After she came back, she was quieter, sadder, maybe wiser. I wanted to be there for her more than I'd ever wanted anything in the world. Not being able to fix things for her, not being able to make it better, that hurt more than anything I could ever remember. I guess that's when I realized how in love with her I was. I told her that I loved her, that I wanted to be there with her, and she told me that she couldn't handle the idea of any kind of emotional connection for a while. Maybe a few years, she said. Maybe never. Maybe she'd never be able to open up emotionally again. She said she needed space from me, particularly from me. She said she needed to figure out what it meant to be alive in a world where her sisters were gone. She asked me to give her time, and I told her that I'd give her anything she wanted. She told me that she'd never been happier than she was when we were together. I told her the same. I told her that I understood, and that's when we made our pact. I was 25 then, and she was 23. We agreed, if she turned 30 and I turned 32, and if she had learned to heal, and if she hadn't fallen in love with someone else, and if I hadn't fallen in love with someone else, then we'd get married. So that's how we parted ways. She moved to Wyoming, to be alone. I moved to Germany, to get as far away from her as I could. We didn't keep in touch at first, but over the next few years we built up a correspondence. We wrote letters because we both liked writing letters. We emailed now and then. Sometimes we'd mail each other books that we thought the other would like. Years went on, and we became closer and closer. When I turned 30, I half-jokingly brought up our marriage pact. I told her that I had never fallen for anyone else. She replied that she was still very serious about our agreement, and that she'd never fallen in love with anyone else either. I asked her if she thought she had begun to heal, and she said she had, as much as a person could ever heal from something like that. A year later, she told me she'd like us to meet and spend some time together, to see if the spark was still there. It was. She was living in California at that time, and I found a job there. I'd always wanted to live in California anyway. I proposed to her 6 months later, and she smiled and told me no fair, that I had to wait another few months, when she'd be turning 30. I thought it was silly, but at that point things were going so well that a few months didn't seem like they could matter at all. But I'm crying now, so I'll have to wrap this up quickly. She was hit by a drunk driver and spent 2 days in the ICU before her body gave out. She died. That's how the story ends. What is your worst? I looked away for 1 second story. It took only 2 seconds of me looking away from my son to give himself a life-threatening injury. I had just finished changing my 6-month-old son's diaper, with him lying on the couch, with a changing cloth underneath. I turned to throw the diaper in the trash right next to the couch, and in the 2 seconds I didn't have my hands on him. He rolled off the couch. He'd never even rolled over before. He hit the ottoman, which spun him back the other way, and he smacked his head on the hardwood floor. He cried, but calmed down after a few minutes. There was no sign of swelling, no blood, or any signs of damage. We were worried about a possible concussion, so we kept a close eye on him the rest of the day. When it was time for us to go to bed, we decided to stay up and watch a movie instead, and I went in and checked on him partway through the movie while my wife went to make some popcorn. I changed his diaper, and he woke up a little. One of his pupils was overdilated, and the side of his face had started to droop like he was having a stroke. We immediately grabbed our diaper bag, jumped in the car, and drove to the hospital, which fortunately was only 10 minutes away. I walked into the ER carrying my son and told the nurse that I thought he was having a stroke. She checked him, took us to a back room, and within minutes the room was swarming with medical personnel. A doctor informed us that it looked like our son had cracked his skull internally, and there was swelling in the brain. They would need to perform open cranial surgery immediately to relieve the pressure on the brain. The doctor told us that they weren't sure he would survive the surgery, but it was the best option. We were whisked into another room, separated, and asked questions about exactly how the injury had happened. They wanted to make sure it wasn't due to abuse, because they said that falling off the couch onto the floor shouldn't have had the force to crack an infant's skull. At this point, his mom and I were both sobbing, just trying to figure out what was going on and whether our son was going to be okay. When they finally finished interviewing us, they brought us into a waiting room. I called my parents to tell them what was happening, and then another doctor came to tell us that the surgery had gone well, but that they'd had to remove around 2/3 of his brain tissue due to the blood saturation damage. He showed us an X-ray or MRI they had done just before actually beginning cutting that showed what looked like a crescent moon of gray matter clinging to the left edge of the interior of the skull, with the rest of the image filled by blackness, which the doctor told us was blood. He advised us that even if he survived the rest of the night, our son would likely never learn to walk or talk. When the surgery was done, they brought him to us. He was still groggy from the anesthesia, but other than being fussy, he seemed otherwise like his normal self. Of course, there was also a large incision wound, stitches, and tubes coming out of his head to drain off the excess fluid. It was around 2 a.m. at this point, but I called our religious leader, who I was also good friends with, to tell him about the situation. He came and prayed with us, and offered a blessing for our son, just that he would make it through the night. He survived the night. He survived the next week, and the next month, and every time the doctors saw him, they said it was a miracle that he was alive. He had mild seizures for a few months after the operation, and when he first started to crawl, he would sometimes just stop and freeze for a second or two for no apparent reason, but remarkably, the remaining 1/3 of his brain matter that they left grew to fill the rest of his brain cavity. The blood vessels from the left side of his brain spread and grew all the way across to cover the right side where the original vessels had been destroyed. He learned to talk and walk within the regular timeframes, and has had no noticeable residual effects of his traumatic injury. When we took him back to the hospital 6 months later for his final post-op checkup, every one of the nurses said it was a miracle that he was even alive, much less talking and moving around like a normal 1-year-old. My dad's sentence was too short, so the prisoners inside took care of him for good. My father intimately abused me and my siblings growing up. I was the youngest of 3 siblings and was the one that spoke out, eventually getting him arrested. He only got charged with 1 count against my sister. Me and my brother have spoken about what happened a few times and both feel we never got justice for what he did. He got 4 years in federal prison as well as charges for having substances and some illegal weapons, an assault rifle and pistol that weren't registered, in Canada BTW. For a time in my teenage years I ended up living in a bad neighborhood, living with my gang member friends and selling substances to pay for myself to eat. Don't judge me for that, I only sold green, which can't kill anyone, so I feel fine about it. One day a higher up in the gang my friends were in came by our apartment because I was selling a lot of green and he was beginning to not like it. He gave me a boot area and I respected him since he respected me being just a kid trying to finish high school. The higher up, let's call him Greg, would come by once a week to check in, but not in a bad way. Greg actually helped me out, so a month after meeting him I didn't need to sell anymore. He helped with bills and groceries etc. When I asked him why, he told me he knew my dad in jail. The following story is what I remember from what he told me. The prison confirmed this story when I asked. After I turned 18, Greg had been in prison for 3 years when my dad arrived at the prison. Greg and my dad turned out to be cellmates. Greg explained to me that my dad never seemed right, and over a year he managed to gain his trust. My dad revealed to him that he wasn't caught for assaulting multiple people in his charge but didn't actually tell him what he did. Greg, being in a semi-powerful gang, used his connections to find out exactly what my dad did. Greg didn't want to ruin getting out, so all he did was tell the more respected prisoners, of which will never see freedom again and do not have morals. My father was sodomized, beaten, burned, stabbed and beaten again for months before he died. And all I can say is I wish it lasted longer. Greg put the pieces together and looked out for me for 2 years when I had no one. Greg got the justice that me and my siblings really deserved. I am great now. Greg is kind of like an old crazy uncle now. He got shot in the arm and gave up the gang life.
What interaction felt slightly creepy, but became actually terrifying when you later found out the story behind it? I was 12 and my older sister and I were home alone for the weekend. I was waiting for a friend to pick me up, and getting restless. There was a knock on the door. Thinking it was her, I ran to answer it without checking through the peephole. A man was standing there with a clipboard and said he needed to check our gas meter. I was entrenched in the disappointment of my friend still not having arrived, so just told him, yeah, sure, whatever you need to do. I didn't notice at the time, but he wasn't dressed as a city official. He had on a green and purple shirt with bold stripes like the host of Blue's Clues. He came in and immediately went up the stairs to where our bedrooms were and walked into the open door of my room, the typical girly girl room with pink and glitter. My sister came down the stairs at almost that exact moment. She said, "Oh, is that Daphne's dad? Why is he going upstairs?" And I complained about how Daphne wasn't here and was going on about how unreliable she was when my sister cut me off. Wait, if Daphne isn't here, who is that? I said, "He's here to read the gas meters." Her face turned white. She flung open the front door and dragged me out, hand clamped over my protesting mouth. She said, "Our gas meters are outside." Neither of us had a cell phone and obviously weren't going back in the house to call authorities on the landline phone. Then my ever-resourceful sister had a stroke of genius. A man was walking right by our house and she motioned him over. She called, loudly, into the house, "Oh Dad, it's good you're home. A man from the city is here to read the gas meters upstairs." And just like she'd hoped, this man on the street said, "What are you talking about?" The man in the striped shirt bolted out of the house. The man on the street asked us repeatedly if we were okay and if we needed him to stay and wait in the yard with us until our parents came home. He was very sweet. We were so startled that we barely thanked him before slamming and locking the doors and windows. As irate as my sister was that I let someone in the house, she begged me not to call the authorities, because my parents left her in charge and she worried she'd be in trouble. I didn't want to catch any heat from carelessly allowing some guy in, so I was on the same page. 3 weeks later, a girl in our community went missing. She was home alone and authorities found the door open and no signs of forced entry. My sister and I discussed our options, but deep down knew we had no choice but to come clean. We told the police everything. I don't know if it ever helped, but they did tell us they had reason to believe it was the same man. They also tracked down the man who helped us on the street. Turns out we already knew him. He worked in the butcher shop. We just didn't recognize him. Our parents were mortified. They weren't angry with us, just glad we were okay, though they did review all the rules of caution and didn't leave us home alone for a while. They found the girl and said she'd been held for a few days and then burned alive. They never caught the man.
What single moment killed your relationship on the spot? It happened last week. We both went out for dinner. She is pure vegetarian and I am non-vegetarian. To come in this relation, she made a pact that she will never eat non-veg ever. I said yes. Moreover, I decided to not eat non-veg in front of her as it makes her uncomfortable. I eat non-veg almost daily before meeting her for lunch or sometimes at dinner. And as a hardcore non-vegetarians, my knowledge about veg dishes was very poor. So we were at the restaurant and I asked her to order. As it was a veg restaurant, I thought it would be great if she would pick some dishes. She took almost 20 minutes and did not come up with anything. As we were already there in the closing hour, I asked her, "May I select something?" She said, "Okay." She, "What do you like in veg?" Me, "Nothing specific. But I am okay with paneer items." She, "Oh, please don't order paneer because I hate it." Me, "Oh, let me order mushrooms then?" She, "No, not at all. Mushrooms taste like non-veg. And I don't like it also." Me, with frustration now, "Let's do one thing. You order whatever you want and let me order my food." I was damn hungry too. The next moment I ordered mushroom and she again lost in the menu. Then the waiter came and told her, "Ma'am, we are about to close. Please give your order and make sure, it should be your final order." She, "Give me some time." After 10 minutes, she ordered masala dosa. My mushroom dish was ready for serving. Me, after taking a few bites, "Would you like to taste?" She, "Of course." And she tasted it and the first word she said, "This tastes shit. How can someone eat it? That's why I hate mushrooms." Me, "Don't you think, you should think about other people also sometime? I eat veg just because of you. First, you are so picky about food. Second, you are commenting on food also that too so loud." She, "I am like that only and I am not going to change for anyone." That was the moment I realized, I should end this relationship immediately. Not everyone deserves your devotion, compromise, and respect.
People related to a psychopath, what is your craziest story? When I was younger, my little sister made 3 attempts to harm me, but thankfully, she was too small to succeed. We were 7 and 5 years old at the time. The first incident happened because I had refused to sleep in her bed, which she believed was a sacrifice to protect her from the boogeyman. Here's the longer version of the story. We each had our own rooms, but for 2 years, I wasn't allowed to sleep in mine. Every time I tried, my sister would have a tantrum, and our parents would convince me to stay in her room just to get everyone to sleep. They even installed a bunk bed in her room, but she still insisted that we share a single bed. One night, I woke up to find that she had wet the bed. I was upset because I didn't want to be there in the first place, and now I was covered in pee. She yelled at me to get back in bed, but I refused. Frustrated, she got up and attempted to attack me, accidentally smearing more urine on me in the process. At that point, both of us were screaming, and our parents woke up and came to see what was happening. I don't recall the exact conversation, as it's been almost 30 years, but essentially, she demanded that I sleep in the pee-soaked bed, and she would sleep against the wall as if nothing had happened. When our parents disagreed, she became distressed and admitted that she believed there was a monster in the closet. She had insisted on sharing a bed with me to protect herself from being harmed by the monster, and she was terrified that if I moved back to my room or even to a different mattress, the monster would attack her. It's important to remember that she was only 5 years old. To address the situation, my parents removed the mattress from the top bunk and took away the wet one. They convinced me to be a good older sister and protect her from the monster. Reluctantly, I allowed myself to be guided back into bed with her. I can't recall if it happened that night or the following night, but as soon as we were alone, she whispered to me that she made me sleep with her because one day the monster would come out to eat one of us, and she planned to escape while it was attacking me. Without saying a word, I immediately got up and moved to my own room. I was willing to defend her from the monster, but I refused to be used as a distraction for it. When our parents came to investigate the commotion, I refused to return to her room, and eventually, they understood and allowed me to stay in my own space. From that point on, I slept with my door locked to ensure my safety. It was a challenging time, and while our parents didn't believe me when I explained that my sister had attempted to suffocate me, I took precautions to protect myself. What is the most unforgivable thing your family has ever done to you? My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend. My entire family knew. When I was 18 and in my senior year of high school, I truly believed my life was on a good track. I lived with my parents and 4 siblings and spent most of my days hanging out with my best friend Ashley or my boyfriend, Kyle. Both Ashley and Kyle's parents were best friends with my parents, so I had known both of them since we were in diapers. We spent holidays together, celebrated birthdays, and visited each other all the time since we lived in the same town. My 20-year-old sister was also dating Kyle's brother, and all our siblings were very close. Ashley had been my friend for 18 years, and she was truly the person I trusted with everything. Sometimes our parents would joke that we were connected at the hip because we were always together. I had been dating Kyle for the last 3 years, and I believed he was the love of my life. We were quite serious and even talked about getting married after he finished college. Although I had plans to go to university, I was content with the idea of being married to Kyle and being a stay-at-home mom. My parents loved Kyle and supported our relationship. I was genuinely happy. One day, at the beginning of the school year, I noticed that Ashley was feeling very melancholic and detached. After prodding her for a while, she told me she was pregnant. I was surprised because she and her boyfriend had broken up a while ago, and I wasn't aware that she had anyone else in her life like that. I asked her who the father was, but she didn't want to talk about it. She implied in a way that her ex was the father. She was distraught, so I dropped the topic and consoled her. I was there for her when she told her family, and although her parents were disappointed, they promised to support her in whatever decision she made. They tried to make her share the father's name, but she refused and made me promise to keep quiet. I stood by her side for the next 9 months. I went with her to ultrasound appointments and doctor's visits. I supported her when she was bullied in school for being pregnant. I helped her set up the nursery, and threw a baby shower for her. We chose names together, and she even asked me to be with her in the delivery room. I noticed that the pregnancy was taking a toll on her emotionally and physically, so I tried to support her in every possible way. She was my best friend, and I loved her. 2 weeks before her due date, I went to the mall to run some errands and unexpectedly ran into Ashley's ex. Even though I had promised never to contact him, the knowledge of my friend's emotional state sent me into a fit of anger, and I confronted him. I expressed my anger and told him what a terrible person he was for leaving his ex pregnant and alone without caring for his unborn child. He was shocked and said he had no idea what I was talking about. Ashley had never told him about the pregnancy. When I informed him that she was 9 months pregnant at the time, he said it was not possible for him to be the father as they had broken up over a year ago and hadn't been together since then. I was confused but apologized for yelling at him in the middle of the mall. After that, he became snarky, said some nasty things, and suggested that I should ask Ashley's friend Kyle if he was the father. At the time, I didn't really think much about his words. Kyle and Ashley had been friends their entire lives, and although we were always very close due to our parents' relationship, they had never shown any signs of being anything more than friends. That evening, my younger sister and I were preparing to have a movie night. I started ranting to her about confronting Ashley's ex and his words. Usually outspoken, my sister remained quiet and didn't respond. After a while, she excused herself and went to the bathroom. I decided to go downstairs to the kitchen to grab some snacks, and that's when I overheard my younger sister berating my mother. My memory of this part is fuzzy as I was dealing with a lot of emotions. My sister told my mom about running into Ashley's ex and his words, and she no longer wanted to hide from me the fact that Kyle was the father of Ashley's baby. I was absolutely shocked. Stunned, I stumbled into the kitchen and demanded an explanation. Both my mom and sister turned white as sheets upon seeing me, and my sister burst into tears. She explained to me that near the end of the summer break, Kyle and Ashley attended the same house party, got drunk, and slept together. Ashley got pregnant and told Kyle, but they were both ashamed and afraid to tell me. They also kept it from their parents. However, Ashley couldn't bear the secret and confided in her mom and dad, who then told Kyle's parents and later mine as well. This all happened during Ashley's first trimester, and by the second trimester, all our siblings, Kyle's siblings, and Ashley's siblings knew about it. Everyone knew except me. I was physically sick for the next 3 days and couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone. My parents were apologetic but explained that they didn't want to see me hurt or damage the relationships between everyone involved. I didn't speak to Kyle or Ashley, even though they bombarded my phone with messages and calls and even came to my house. I refused to see them. At one point, Kyle's mom came to our house, and my mom allowed her into my room. I was lying in bed, still feeling sick and emotionally drained from the betrayal. While I lay there, Kyle's mom tried to convince me to forgive them and emphasized how much Ashley and the baby needed me. I didn't utter a word. 2 weeks later, Ashley went into labor. My parents informed me that she had a difficult delivery, lost a significant amount of blood, and required an emergency C-section. Apparently, Kyle was present during the birth. I was distraught, inconsolable. It was a culmination of the betrayal by both of them, the fact that I had planned to be there but couldn't, and my anticipation of this moment for months. My older sister immediately went to the hospital to be with her boyfriend. My other siblings weren't at home, so I was left alone with my parents. All I wanted was to lie in bed or cuddle with my mom, crying out all my emotions. Then my mom received a call from Ashley's mom. She came into my room and told me that she and dad were going to the hospital. I was perplexed and asked her to stay with me. She explained that Ashley's parents needed all the support they could get, and we would discuss everything later. I tried to tell her not to go and that I needed their support too, but she said I was being selfish, and they left. I was left alone in the house, struggling to comprehend everything that had happened in the past few weeks. I couldn't believe that my parents would go and support someone who had hurt me so much while I was here suffering. Was I truly being selfish to think that way? In a fit of anger and feelings of betrayal, I started packing my bags and decided to leave home. However, It didn't take long for second thoughts to creep in, and I just sat in the living room feeling empty. After a while, I received a text from my sister. The text stated that Ashley had given birth to a healthy girl and that they were both okay. She attached a picture of the newborn and told me they had named her Sarah, the name Ashley and I had chosen months ago. She sent a second text later, informing me that my parents and she were going to join Ashley's and Kyle's parents in a bar in town to celebrate. I don't remember much after that. I think I was consumed by everything, and my memory is very foggy. I took a train and left. I lived in Phoenix for a while and everyone tried contacting me, demanding that I come back, but I ignored them. Soon after I met Dean, who supported me emotionally, and introduced me to his friends. We eventually started dating. Dean soon inherited some money from his grandpa and decided to move across the country to a big city, taking me with him. After my 21st birthday, we spontaneously got married. With his support, I attended university and he started a successful company. Despite not being initially in love, Dean has always been there for me. We've been married for 12 years now, and we have a 2-year-old son and a 6-month-old son. Although I sometimes regret leaving my family, I couldn't go back. Last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, I received an email from a 14-year-old girl named Evelyn. She explained that she was my older sister's and Kyle's brother's child. She knew about me and wanted to meet me. Although I was reluctant to speak with her, we did exchange some emails. Let me note that she did not know what transpired 15 years ago, so our conversations were pretty innocent. We talked about her school, interests, and she told me about my family. I learned that Kyle married Ashley 4 years after I left and had 2 sons in addition to Sarah. My parents continued to maintain a friendship with Kyle and Ashley's families, and my family continued their normal life, despite my absence. She tried to talk to me about what happened, but I didn't really think it was my place to explain things to her. So I simply said that relationships change, and life events sometimes lead us on separate paths. We continued to talk every so often for almost a year. In her email this January, she mentioned that my parents were struggling to keep their house, and both my brothers lost their jobs and were having difficulty coping with the costs. I was surprised by her knowledge of this, considering she was only 14, but the hardships were also causing tensions between her parents. I started dealing with a lot of guilty feelings and regrets. I also just had my baby, so that was causing me lots of emotions. I talked to my husband, and he was very supportive, telling me that he would be there for me no matter what I decided. We were financially stable, and the pandemic didn't have a great impact on our finances. We weren't rich, but we were able to live comfortably. After learning some more details and talking with Dean, we decided to help my parents with their house. A week ago, we flew back to my home state. I saw my family for the first time in 15 years. I had so many emotions, regrets, and pains from the past, along with feelings of betrayal. I think my parents were relieved to see me. It was just such a weird day. We had a lengthy conversation and agreed to try and have some sort of cordial relationship. It had been so long, and I was very awkward with them. Sometimes they felt like strangers. Dean and I spent a week there, continuing our conversation, and I truly believed that we were on a path to having a friendly, yet distant, relationship. But then my mom started insisting that I have a sit-down conversation with Kyle and Ashley. She explained that she wants to go back to the way things were. I told her I refused to talk to them. Although I moved on, I simply have no ties with them now and don't want to rehash anything with them. I told her I am prepared to try and establish a relationship with them as they are my family, but I don't want anything to do with Kyle, Ashley, or their family. I never demanded that they cease their relationship with their friends, but I don't want one. Dean supports me. My mom called me selfish and said that I simply must try and heal our relationship. I told her I will not negotiate and that it's up to her to decide whether or not she wants to have a relationship with me. She said okay, but 2 days later, I received a phone call from Kyle's mom, demanding that I talk with Kyle and Ashley. Supposedly my return caused tensions in their relationship and their emotional health. I hung up immediately. I called my mom and confronted her. Apparently, she gave that woman my number to heal our family bonds. I told her that she is choosing them over me again. She cried and yelled at me, calling me selfish and saying that she just wants her family back. I hung up. It's been days since I spoke to any of them, although my mom and Kyle's mom keep calling. Even though I think I am right and I believe I should prioritize my well-being and the well-being of my family, I am starting to have some regrets. Suddenly, I am questioning the entire course of my life. I am so lost, and I don't know what to do. I would really appreciate any advice on what to do in this situation.
What is the worst thing you have said during a breakup? She was breaking up with me, and I told her, you know you are right, and I agree, we aren't very compatible, and our relationship has been on the decline for some time. Those were my true thoughts and feelings. I felt a sense of relief when she broke up with me because I realized it was the best move for both of us. So why was this the worst thing to say? It ended up making her want to double down on the relationship. I was bombarded with non-stop texts, phone calls, and unannounced visits to my apartment. All of that. Apparently, breaking up things amicably was not how she wanted to go. 2 months after our breakup, she asked me if I missed her. I told her I missed her parents more than I missed her. I had a partner who regularly threatened self-deletion if I left. She was horribly mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive. The last time she did this, She threatened to jump off our apartment balcony. I told her to make sure to do a backflip on the way down so you can at least go out in style. And left the apartment. Unsurprisingly, she didn't do it. Shocking. I once ended a struggling relationship. A few months later I got an email from the person, and it was pages of everything I had ever done wrong in the relationship. I realized that this was why the relationship had been struggling. All these things that had been bothering my partner, and they had bottled them all up inside instead of, say, talking to me about it. So, my entire response to this multiple-page email with everything I had ever done wrong was, I ain't reading all that. What is the most disgusting thing you have ever done that you took pleasure in? My wife and I had 2 wonderful daughters, 13 and 10, and a pretty healthy relationship. At some point things started to appear off. She got very clingy to her phone all of a sudden, made sure to delete the saved password feature on our common PC, stated having phone calls that suddenly ended when I came into the room. You can probably guess what it was. Now having 15 years of marriage behind us, I was hoping it wasn't what it obviously seemed to be. So one day when she told me she was going to spend some time with the girls, I decided to follow her. Sure enough, I find her driving to a hotel to meet with a guy I will call Steve. To say it was a gut punch was an understatement. I literally cried for an hour straight. After I was done with my self-wallowing phase, I decided the best course was getting even. I thought of several scenarios that may or may not have involved me hurting Steve. Eventually I decided to do things more civilly and more importantly legally, but only just. So the first part of the plan was gathering evidence. I could have just gotten a pie, but I had something better in mind. So one day when my wife was at her job and the kids at school, I installed some small secret cameras and microphones I had bought. Due to the setup of our bedroom, I even managed to get one perfectly overlooking the bed. I didn't however use them while I was at home. So a couple of days pass, when I proposed to my wife that the second to next weekend I should take the girls on a trip and stay a night too. I more often than not was the one cooking. I took a far more active role in raising the girls and showed them a lot more patience and attention. She was usually busy working or drinking, so me going alone with the girls on a trip wasn't that weird. So 2 weeks pass, in which time I get my affairs in order and contact a lawyer to write up a separation agreement that would involve me keeping residents in custody. I go on the trip, try to not give anything away to the girls and wait and see if Steve and my wife fall into the trap. When I returned I checked the recordings of the weekend, and sure enough it's a 36-hour fest. When they weren't doing the deed, the dialogue was something even better. I found out that Steve had a wife. But even worse, they also talked about me. And I heard the obvious character assassination that I expected about how small my PP was, an insecurity of mine, how I didn't satisfy her. But there was some really hurtful stuff, like her telling Steve some of my deepest secrets and shameful stories that I had only told her about, just so they could have a laugh. She even told him about my dope story and how I attempted to take my life when I was 16. So at this point I didn't have any doubts on what to do. The next day when the kids left, but before my wife left, I confronted her with the video and told her that either she signs the separation agreement and leaves the house or the girls are going to receive an in-depth explanation of all the positions in which mommy cheated on daddy. I wasn't gonna do that. Just to be clear, I love my daughters too much, but I put the threat there and she was too emotional to realize my bluff. She went through all the stages, denying everything, trying to bargain, threatening me, and getting angry. I let it go through all that stuff. Eventually she signed the paper and she departed that very evening after she told her goodbyes to the girls. I didn't show or tell the girls anything graphic. I was always very honest with them, which is another reason why I was always the favorite parent, so I just said that mommy had been unfaithful. The younger took some time figuring it out, but that was made up by my older getting mightily upset. She had just gotten her first boyfriend, as I'm not sure the term really applies at that age, but she knew enough of the world to get mad big time. This would be important at a would-be custody battle, as though she did for the moment agree to give over custody. I feared, and I was right to fear, that she would try and fight me for the kids. What I didn't expect was for her to use her visitation rights to talk crap about me. Basically she started telling my younger kid about how it was all my fault for not forgiving her. Her lawyer even started demanding she receive custody. So I finally activated my revenge plan. Enter trip to South Carolina. Why South Carolina? Simple. Fort Sumter. I really wanted my daughters to see it. I definitely did not go there because it is one of the last places where revenge corn isn't illegal, and where I could upload my wife and Steve's doings and intimate moments with no worries on the internet and other such sites, as you cannot be prosecuted for crimes that weren't illegal when and where they were committed. I especially made sure to include the clip where Steve could not get it up. I sent the links to my wife's employer, her clients, and everybody in her line of work just to be sure, to Steve's wife and to his firm. Steve soon got a divorce. I feel sorry for his wife as she was an innocent victim in all of this, but I think it's better that she found out. As for my wife, this was the end of any chance to get custody. She soon got fired from her job of 8 years. I got custody. Yes, due to her being unemployed, I got no alimony, but honestly I make enough money to sustain both me and the girls, so I don't care, and I'm good enough at caring for them and they are old enough to allow me to have a full-time job. Several months later, my wife is still unemployed. Last time I spoke to her wife she threatened to come and take my life and how this will be revenge for ruining hers. What are some girls' secrets guys don't know about? You know when you see a woman in a ponytail walking and that ponytail is just swinging aggressively back and forth? Yeah, she's doing that on purpose. We can walk normally so that the ponytail doesn't swing as much. But we don't, because it's fun when ponytail go whoosh whoosh. Some of us shave our toe hairs. Yesterday I overheard 2 women at the thrift store conversing about one's husband asking whether or not she could poop while wearing a tampon. I fled the scene before the secret was revealed. Dogs love to smell our crotches when we're menstruating. It's extremely uncomfortable. The panic when we believe we've either pissed ourselves or have just come on our period. Run to the toilet only to realize it was discharge. I'm a man, but I've been with my wife for 10 years and I am so close to deciphering the meaning of all of the squiggly hair symbols on my shower wall. We sometimes get a random pain in the bob, and wonder if we're gonna get a heart attack. We have a favorite bra. We also wash it less than the others. Pulling up our underwear after using the restroom is the worst because discharge on your underwear will cool down and it's really cold/uncomfortable feeling putting it back on. I was in Discord chat with a bunch of guy friends, and we were gaming. They were talking about giant shits they've taken, and I talked about how period shits work and why progesterone is the devil when it hits your colon. I said it's even weirder when it mixes with the blood and looks like someone dumped peanut butter and jelly. If I'm doing an awkward shuffle, I'm probably trying to get an air bubble out of my vag. Showering during your period is the perfect opportunity to get out any leftovers and clean that thing out. I will keep this secret to my grave. Velp. This has got to be the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to me, yet I'm the only one who knows it happened. I've never told a soul, but it's something I have been dying to share with someone and I am too embarrassed to even say it out loud, so why not do it here anonymously? Praying this does not go viral, lol. I won't be giving any names because honestly I feel that if the people in this story ever came across this post they would know exactly who I am. So, I'll just start with a little context. At one point in my life, I rented a spare bedroom in my best friend's parents' home. It was a 3-bedroom house. Her parents shared one, while she and her partner shared the second, and I of course had the third. This house only had one bathroom, which never really seemed to be a problem for me as I was always either working or out and about. Unfortunately, one night my luck ran out. It was about 4 a.m., and I woke up with my stomach on fire. I went to use the bathroom thinking it would be free because who the hell is up using the bathroom at that time, right? Turns out it's occupied by her dad, and I was not about to knock no matter how much of an emergency it was. I turned back to my room and I'm sitting on my bed, legs literally shaking. I thought he'd be out soon. I went from legs shaking to now pacing my room. Mind you, my stomach has now been burning for the past 15 minutes. I went to check again. It's silent, but he's still in there. I go back to my room and continue pacing. At this point, I'm looking around to see what I can use or where I could go. I'm becoming desperate. I thought about finding a spot in the backyard, but there were dogs that I knew would be too noisy jumping all over me and I didn't want to be caught mid-crap at 4 a.m. by her dad. I kept thinking and thinking like what do I do? It's now been well over 20 minutes and he's still in the bathroom. I make a desperate decision to quietly walk out the front door and look to see if there was a spot I could hide to relieve myself from this hell. I look out into the street. It's dark and scary and this wasn't the greatest neighborhood, so I decided to go behind a porch swing they had placed in the corner of their yard. I practically ran over pulling my PJs down as I go because I knew once I got there I wouldn't have a second to spare. When I tell you I have never felt such relief in my life, my God. Once I finished I cleaned myself up. Yes, I took some paper towels with me, and decided I would water it down with the hose in a couple of hours as I'm leaving for work. The last thing I wanted was for her dad to come out of the bathroom and hear the water running and find me watering his grass at 4 a.m. like some kind of spun out weirdo. I went back to bed and when it came time for me to leave for work, you guessed it, I forgot. I went to work without a care in the world, and then it hit me. I thought about it the entire freaking day, hoping and praying that no one had noticed. I kept thinking the moment I got home I would immediately spray it down and it would be over. No one would ever know. I finally arrive home from work. It's already a little past 6 p.m. I walk over to where I left the crime scene. It was gone. Mortified, I walk straight to my room. Luckily, no one was in the living room so I didn't even have to see anyone as I did my walk of shame. A few hours go by, and I get a text asking if I'd like to join a smoke sesh with my best friend and her partner. I go out to meet them on the front porch and sit on the bench next to my best friend. They're acting completely normal. We're all talking and passing this joint when all of a sudden she says, "OMG, guess what happened today?" My heart dropped. I instantly knew what she was going to say, but really no I didn't because what came out of her mouth next I never would have imagined, lol. She then tells me that she and her partner had gone out to smoke on the porch swing in the front yard earlier in the day. Yes. That porch swing. She tells me that as they are smoking she is playing fetch with her dog. The dog was obsessed with squeaky toys. She got lost in conversation with her partner when she realized she hadn't seen her pup in a little while, so she starts calling her name. She looks behind the swing, and as she locked eyes on her, her dog was smelling something and before she could yell at her to get her away from it, her dog proceeds to roll in IT. She flipped out and grabbed her as quickly as she could while her partner runs to grab the water hose to spray her down. Then her partner says, "Dude, something took a poop in our yard." And that poop did not smell like dog poop, it smelled like human poop. They both continue to explain to me how horrible and disgusting it smelled while I sat there with the best poker face I could make. I was dying inside. Then she says once he started to spray the dog down, it got all over her arms, while also making the hand gestures of how covered her arms were in my poop. I'm dead on the inside at this point, trying so hard not to make any suspicious expressions. They both kept saying how they have no idea what animal could have made a poop like that, all the while I sat there knowing the animal was me. It's been a few years since this has happened, and I don't think I could ever bring myself to tell her the truth. I will probably take this to my grave, but now it's off my chest.